So we will be presenting today RENKU. We are Mark, the team lead, and myself, Elizabeth Capon. I am the community manager. So basically, what is RENKU? Our vision for RENKU is it is an open source platform that connects code, data, and compute to empower building collaborative communities. And please bear in mind these three main elements. It's everything around code, data, and compute resources that are linked to people and are brought together for making people work together. The agenda for today is as follows. We have three main parts of the presentation. The first one is more what are the benefits for RENKU in events. The second one is on the long term, how can RENKU enable collaborative projects and collaborative communities? And the last one, Rock will provide you a tour so that you get familiar with the interface and how RENKU works as a user or as a challenge owner. So let's start with events. That's one of our use cases, and we have already held some hackathons and events in RENKU. And basically the benefits and how RENKU supports you, we will present them depending on what is your role. So for the organizers of the event, RENKU provides a consistent environment for all the teams and allows you to have the participants working right away without having to set up individually, locally in their computers, the access to the code and to the data, so that they can work flawlessly, and so the participants can focus directly on innovation and not on setting up the infrastructure. As a challenge owner, you can set up for your specific challenge. You can provide the participants with the access to the data that they need to use, with the access to the software components that you may need, specific software requirements and packages that the participants may need to leverage for solving their challenges. And you ensure that they will not get lost and they will start coding right away. As a participant, it will be extremely easy. You will have everything under the same project page, and you will be able to start coding without having to worry to request access for the data and to grant access to your colleagues in the same group where you are working. So all of you will have exactly the access to the same resources and will start coding immediately. Accessing to RENKU is straight away. It's on the web browser. You can see on the slide the web URL. And basically, what you can see is that through the URL, when you access a given project, you can have on the screen visibility about the compute sessions, visibility about the data in your project, about code repositories, and of course, who are the members of that project with whom you will be working during the challenge. So everything is brought to you systematically and consistently for you and your team members. So if we go to the different elements on RENKU, we mentioned that there are these three elements: code, data, and compute. And depending on the level of skills of the people working in the project, you may set it up in two different ways. One of them is called exclusive or pre-configured way, where the participants basically have, for each group of participants, they will have already set all the resources. The code will be given to the code repository, will be given to them. The session launchers will be predefined for them, and also the access to the data. So everything will be pre-configured. This is intended specifically for those use cases where participants have little knowledge about how to set up the resources, so little software engineering skills. And in cases where you don't want the participants to know what the other participants are projects are working on. So if you want to limit the visibility of the participants to their specific project and have everything set end-to-end for them, you have the exclusive mode. For the template mode, you allow the participants to have visibility across all the projects that are going through in the event, in the hackathon, and you give them also more flexibility. So this is for cases where the participants are more knowledgeable about how to work with Git, how to bring data. So this is the second use case, more about the template mode. In any case, what are the skills required for the participants? The skills required for the participants, we do not have a minimum requirement. So usually in our hackathons before, you can gather people from different backgrounds, people who may have more skills on the software engineering domain, and people who are more knowledgeable in a specific domain and are less prone to coding. They can all come together in RENKU and participate and collaborate together. Yeah, that's a bit it. And that's the first part. On the second part, we will be talking about collaboration. So beyond the event, how can RENKU support building collaborative communities and collaborative groups? In this sense, you may be aware of the FAIR principle that is usually nowadays very trendy topic. Basically, what RENKU allows, it reduces the friction that comes when you have heterogeneous groups or scattered groups of people working together under the same project. The first item that RENKU solves is about findability. When you, on RENKU, you can decide the visibility of your project. So projects don't exist in isolation, and you can make them open to the other members of the group, and you can enable visibility about the different elements, including the data and including the resources. So it allows the search to have a search across the projects. Of course, this always depends from case to case. This doesn't mean that if for any reason a project needs to be kept private, RENKU also allows users to decide on the level of privacy of the projects. Accessibility. So basically, as I said before, you don't need a specific background, technical background for being able to use RENKU. It lowers the entry barrier to the technology, so you can have groups of people with various backgrounds working together on the same project. Interoperability, the next feature is about the possibility of connecting people, disregarding of the software that they may need, being able to connect to different data, stored across different infrastructure. So it gives you the flexibility to have the data in the best infrastructure that fits your organization. And the same with code. There is a lot of integration and interoperability across systems. That's the full idea behind RENKU. And last but not least is about reusability. So in case some of the resources, including the data, code repositories, or even projects, can be further reused by other groups of people, it's very easy to navigate and basically reuse those components into a new project. So these are like the main advantages that RENKU brings when you are working collaboratively more in the long term. Here we can see a bit the landscape that usually we have when we are working in compute or code related projects. So usually we have an heterogeneous sources of data. So there are many kinds of data sources. We have public data repositories as Zenodo, Dataverse, or even universities are providing their own access to the data. So we have that on the one hand side. We also have all the cloud storage providers that they provide their own data stores in shaped as an S3 bucket or as a file share or as a blob storage. That's on the data side. Then on the coding side, there are different types of Git-enabled version control systems as GitLab and GitHub. So RENKU also allows your projects to be connected to these code repository platforms. And last but not least, there may be, depending on the projects, different compute requirements. So RENKU gives you access, as one of our team members was saying, you may have resources beyond your local compute. So we can grant you access to GPUs or to higher CPU sizes than the ones that you can access locally through your computer. So the full idea of RENKU is that bringing all this ecosystem of elements together and making it easy for the users, the participants, to work on these resources without a deep technical understanding of how can I connect these items together. And with this, we can, this is a bit how it looks like. Rob will share in a moment the tour through RENKU. This is how a project looks like. So at the very top, we have, of course, the title and a short description. And immediately below, you can have access to the session launchers. This launch is a session where you will be able to work actually in the code. You have a separate section at the bottom left, the data section, where you can see what are the data sources for your project, the data connectors, where your data will be coming from, and access to the, and you also have at the bottom left-hand side, the access to the code repositories. And of course, you can have also provide some documentation for the users so that they don't get lost and they can have something to start reading about the project. Rob will share also later, you can decide which are the members of a project. So you will be able to individually provide access to a different project with whom you will be working and enable this collaborative environment for the project. So with this thing, we'll wrap up the slide part and we will go more on the hands-on part, and we will have questions at the end.
Okay, are there any questions right now about the high-level information that, the high-level structure that Elizabeth presented? If not, I will go ahead into the demo. So yeah, when I log into RENKU Lab, I land on my dashboard here, where you can see that I've already got some compute sessions running. I'll get to these later. You can also see a list of my projects. Obviously, if you were to log in right now, your dashboard would probably look more empty than this. But eventually, when you start working on stuff, it gets populated in this way. So really, what I hope to show you today is just how to essentially get started on a project. And I will transition that also into how we envisioned some of the ways that you could make some starter projects available for participants in the hackathon. So to start a project, it's basically very simple. I will create one with a title that will become clear later. And here I can decide what the visibility is. I can decide whether I want to make it into my own namespace, so it's private to me, or if I want to include it in one of the groups that I'm a member of already. You can also transfer projects between owners later. So if you make a project in your private namespace and then later on decide to want to move it to a group, that's perfectly doable. That's perfectly fine. And here you can also add some optional description if you want. Once I create this, I get basically an empty version of what the screenshot that Elizabeth showed a few slides ago. Here I can immediately, if I need to, I can add additional project members. So let's say here, I know that Elizabeth is in here, so I can add her to be one of the project members on my project, for example. And now she will be able to see this, even though it's been marked as private. But basically, now that we have this project, we can start adding the assets that we need to actually do some fun work with it. So the first thing we want to do is add some data. And data can be added in the form of a data connector. The important phrase here is, the important word here is connector, because RENKU, inside the RENKU Lab platform, we don't actually store data, we connect you to data sources. So in this case, here you have a couple options to do this. So you can actually specify an identifier for a data source, a data connector that is already in RENKU Lab. You can import published data from a place like Zenodo by just specifying its identifier here, or you can create your own data connector. And so here, especially for the challenge owners, this is what we will be helping you do to get the challenges off the ground, is to create a data connector that will link in the data that you want to make available. And here there's a bunch of options. Most popular ones are usually S3 storage or Azure Blob storage, but there's also the potential to hook into something like a Nextcloud or OwnCloud service or an SFTP. We've also used, for example, Samba shares, CIFS shares. So there's a whole variety of types of storages that we can connect to here. Right now, I will just look for a data connector in RENKU to actually just link it in here. So I am a member of the RENKU team, and here you can see on our RENKU team page that we have a number of projects, but we also have a number of data connectors. So immediately what I can do here is when I click on any of these data connectors, you see some information about it, you see its identifier, who the owner is, etc., and then also which projects it's currently being used in. And to use it in my own project, all I have to do is copy this identifier, go back to my project and link it in, and then I'm all set up and ready to go to use this data from my project. So again, this is a data connector, which is essentially just information about how to connect to data somewhere in the cloud that somebody else had created before me, right? I didn't make this one, I'm just using it here. And when I finally, in a minute, I will launch a compute session, and this data would then be made available in that compute session. The second thing that we need here to make this project actually work is a code repository. So we'll go here into my GitHub and find the code repository that I want to use here. I've prepared some basic code. I have a Jupyter notebook with some example analysis of the data that we're linking in there. You can think of this as sort of a way to just very quickly get a feel for what the data looks like, what the data is doing, and so on. Importantly here, I've also specified a requirements file. So this is a Python project, and I was able to specify here a couple of libraries that I know we will need for this project. This means that then the way I will set up the project is that then whoever comes into my project and wants to use my data and wants to use my code, they don't have to worry about installing anything. They will just be able to click the launch button and have all this stuff already installed. Of course, in this case, this is quite trivial. These are very common, simple libraries. But you can have, obviously, a much longer list of dependencies here that are more specific to your use case. Yeah, and then all I need to do here to bring my repository in there is to copy the repository URL and add it here into my project. And now it's part of my project, and you'll see here that RENKU knows that I have both write and read access to this repository. That's because I've linked my GitHub account to my RENKU account, so we can automatically then also manage the Git credentials for people, which is extremely convenient when you are, coding away in an interactive session and you just want to start, pushing some code. all of your credentials and everything are already taken care of, so you don't have to worry about that part. Now, finally, the last part we need to actually do something here is to create a session launcher. And here again, you have a few different options. One option that a lot of people use just to get something going is to use one of our pre-made compute environments. These don't have a custom selection of libraries. This is just sort of generic, general libraries that are useful for data science. For example, in this one, you have here an example of a VS Code based session. You have an RStudio session or a Jupyter session, and also a virtual desktop if for some reason people need desktop apps. It's also possible to have a fully customized environment just coming from a Docker image. This is a more advanced option for use cases where it's really something custom that needs to be installed or something custom that needs to be presented in a session. But it is possible, and we can help you set that up. It's usually it requires some knowledge of how Docker images work and how this needs to be configured for RENKU, but it's definitely possible, and we do this all the time. And now the third option is to actually create this computational environment with all the libraries and everything inside, customized to the code that you're linking into your project. So in this case, I've linked in my GitHub repository that I showed you earlier, which has the requirements file for the packages. Here, Python is for now the only option, which is good because we have a Python project. But you can also choose between two different interfaces. You can choose either VS Code, or you can choose JupyterLab. In this case, we'll choose JupyterLab. And then the final thing we need is to decide which kind of course, we can give it a name, customize its name if we want to, but we need to decide which kinds of resources this session will need. In this case, I here have access to the default pool, which is a public pool. Anybody can access this one. In the case of the hackathon here, we'll create a special resource pool that will have access to more powerful compute. So there will be access to GPUs, access to more powerful sessions, and then the users will be able to select that here. In this case, we don't need anything special, so I will just pick the smallest one that's available. And once I add this, now, as you can see here, it says build in progress. RENKU is off, busy building my image for me. And once that is done, I can then finally launch this session. For now, I will go to a project where I already have a session running, so we don't have to wait for this. But in general, this typically takes, on the order of 2 to 5 minutes to be up and running. Right, so this is essentially an identical project to what I just showed you. With one additional piece, I added here also a data set from Zenodo. This is coming directly from Zenodo for those of you who are familiar with this. It's a published data set. And what RENKU does is it pulls in the metadata for this data set so you can find it inside RENKU, but then it also mounts the data inside the session for you so you can very easily use it from there. So here I have the session already running. This is exactly the same environment that I just created in the other project. And once I'm in, I can see here all of the pieces of my project that we've linked in here. So we have the data set that I found inside RENKU Lab. We have my code repository here with the notebook. So we can open up the notebook and start running this. So, if somebody was interested in this data set specifically, they could use this notebook to get a sense of how to actually use the data. And you see here that it's got the libraries installed as per the instructions in the requirements file. And the other thing we've got is then this Zenodo data set, which is a nice way, I think, to combine potentially some proprietary private data sets with also public data if needed. And it also just appears here in the file system, and anybody and users can then just can use this directly from code if they want to. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say about this session. And as Elizabeth was saying earlier, what we envision here in these projects is that you can actually bring different types of project members together, right? And especially in a hackathon setting, you might have someone who's very strong at coding. You might have somebody who's more on the visual side. You might have somebody who's more on the domain side and really knows the ins and outs of the data. So these people can have different entry points into the project. So in this case, here I configured a Python environment. We could, for example, if we had somebody that's more statistics oriented, add RStudio for them. They could work on exactly the same assets, but through a different interface with a different language if they wanted to. What I added here just for the demo is actually a dashboard. So you can actually also build inside RENKU projects dashboards for those users or for those potentially interested parties in the project that won't necessarily be coding, but they might be interested in some high-level results from the project. So somebody, in the hackathon group could build a dashboard to maybe show us a demo at the end, or to have an easier time communicating the results of the project. And you're really free here what you choose. This happens to be an example with Streamlit for those of you who are familiar, but we've also done things with Plotly Dash, for example, or with RStudio Shiny. All of those are possible to link in here. Now, finally, the other bit I wanted to show you was that I don't know if anybody's paying close attention, you will have noticed that here it says that this project was actually copied from somewhere. And this is actually a project that we made some time ago, and we marked it as a template project. And now this is the kind of mode that Elizabeth was mentioning earlier, where you can actually set up kind of an example project with all the stuff inside that you need. And then somebody can come in and make a copy of it. In this case, actually, let me go back here. In this case, so if I hadn't made a copy already, there would be a copy button here, so I could get started right away. But because I already have a copy, we don't show that. I'm also the owner of this project through the RENKU team, so I can see the copies that have been made of it. So if you imagine you have a group in the hackathon, you create a template project, and you're able to kind of see where this project went essentially by checking the copies that have been made. So this is just an easy way to keep track of that. And you see here that it's got all the same stuff inside. It's got the code repo, it's got the data source, and it has a different environment than what I ended up with. But that's okay. Once you make a copy of this, you can modify it any way you want. So the way this looks like is you copy it. Let's make here, give it a different name. And so once I do the copy, it looks obviously exactly the same. But now it's mine. Now it's in my namespace. I can do whatever I want to it. I can start modifying it. I can add another code repository if I want. I can add more data sources if I want. But the basic structure that lets me get started on the project is all there for me. Ideally, there will also be some documentation down here that kind of tells people how they can get going. So that brings me to the end of what I wanted to show in terms of demo, and I want to pause just to see if there's any questions from those that are present here.
Yeah, go first.
Yes, maybe one, because you mentioned kind of storing data in some file storage or whatever. What is the recommended way to deal with databases? So would you more like connecting a database that is somewhere distant, or more going for like having file storage within custom environment, building kind of a Docker image for the database in the environment?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So if the database is accessible from RENKU Lab, then one way of doing it is to, and this is kind of an advanced option that I didn't go into, but one way of doing it is to create here what's called a session secret. And you can use the session secret to essentially store the connection information. So I can create here a secret, and I could say something like this. And when I launch my session, I will then get this secret mounted in this location inside the session. And then you can use that from code to actually connect to the database. Or you could also use that, you could also connect to the database in a dashboard or whatever, it doesn't matter, but your code would have to process those credentials. And once you do this, you can provide here a new value, or you can use an existing one. So if you already got your connection information somewhere from another project, you can actually just select it here. You don't have to constantly be creating new ones. What's nice about this is that when you launch a session here, let's see, it asks you for this value. So if a new user comes and wants to use your project, then they're kind of, it lets them know that you need this to actually fully use the project, but the secrets are stored per user. So you don't share them across the group, you don't share them publicly or anything. It's really per user. So if you wanted, members of the hackathon group to have access to the database, you would need to give them the credentials. Hope that makes sense. It's actually a good point. Just one thing, Matthias, I know you also had a question, but what I forgot to mention is that we do have I only showed public data connectors, but we do have the option of adding data connectors which require some sort of credentials. And in that case, you are prompted to enter the credentials for the data connector. And once you do this once, RENKU remembers them for you, and then you don't have to do it again. But they're, again, just like the secrets, they're per user. They're not shared, so you have to distribute them outside of the platform. And then when the users, the first time they try to connect, they will be asked for those credentials. And then from that point on, they're just free to use the data connector normally.
And my question goes into a similar direction, also dealing with the data, because we also faced the situation that more and more challenge owners are also requesting NDAs or actually bringing their own APIs. And then when the teamwork is starting, they're providing the team members the APIs. So the question would be how to deal with, for example, we have the public data, which is available. Also with existing APIs, data sets, etc. This would be actually our part, how we actually would bring in the existing data sets and APIs. But on the other side, also the private data or the challenge owners data to actually to guarantee also this secret saying, hey, either we can go on with the NDA or with the credentials or with the secret saying, hey, it's separate. And it's only provided for the team members working during the time from till on this project. And if somebody else wants to continue with the project afterwards, no, actually this is only provided for the working session, etc. Is it also possible that you just have one or two information about this topic, how to deal with public and private data?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, for API access, I think it will go along the same lines as what the previous question was. It would be the same setup as for the database. For example, but if it was through a data connector where credentials are required, again, those credentials need to be distributed outside of the platform. We have nothing to do with that, who has credentials and what those credentials actually allow you to access. We only use them when the user asks us to mount a data source. And that's important because it allows you to revoke access at the source. So if you have if you are the challenge organizer or the data owner, you have a way of exposing that data through some credential, giving access via some credential. And then, if a week after the hackathon you want to revoke that access, all you have to do is revoke those credentials, and then the access is gone. Again, even in a let me go here, and I will actually try to add one of my own data connectors, maybe to illustrate this point. So I have this one here that requires access keys. It's an S3 bucket. I get, first of all, when I add it in here, because this is a private data connector, which means that just its existence is not shown to everyone, right? This is my private data connector, so only I can see it. RENKU tells me here that not everybody, so for example, if Elizabeth went into this project, she wouldn't be able to even see this data connector. And even if she was able to see it, she would still need to enter the credentials here. So you can actually have a public data connector that requires credentials that still does not automatically give access to the data, right? The data connector only stores the information about how to access the data, but not the access itself, if that makes sense. For that, you still need the credentials. And if whoever gave me these credentials would revoke them, I would no longer be able to access this data in my project, right? So we're hoping that this gives enough flexibility for challenge owners to really be in control of how this data is distributed and how long access to it is granted. And I think in this case, they would essentially need to give the challenge participants access keys ahead of time before the challenge begins, and then let them know that they will be revoked at some later point. Was that sufficiently elaborated, Matthias? Okay.
I would go on with this, but others first. Yeah.
Yes, if you don't mind, I have a question. So all the functionalities, they are provided by your infrastructure, is that right? Or do you have other access to AWS or something?
So for compute, for the time being, yes, everything will probably be running on the infrastructure that we operate. In the future, it's also possible to actually link in. We're working on this right now. It's not quite ready yet, but it'll be possible to link in other compute infrastructures like AWS or other clouds. With regards to storage, we're pretty agnostic where the storage comes from. So we have plenty of examples where we're using S3 buckets from AWS or from other providers. So that's pretty flexible for the storage.
Okay. Do we know as soon as it is the computing power is led to AWS, or is it like hidden?
You mean if it's clear where the compute is taking place?
Yeah. If I'm starting my computing, so I know where it will conduct it.
Yes. So, for example, that is basically the element here of the resource pool. So, in this case, the default resource pool right now is running on our infrastructure here at Switch in Zurich. But if we were hooked into an external cloud, we would tell you here that this would run on AWS or it would run on Azure, for example.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, then I think I will.
No, wait.
I'm sorry.
If there's no question, actually, just some hints also for the access. You started with the access to the RENKU platform, and for your information, it's about we couldn't make it this year to implement RENKU in time into the event platform. So this year we need to run on parallel, means the event platform is where the challenges will be posted, where the challenges will be dealt with, where the team communication takes place, and it's all with a single sign-on. RENKU, we have it. Rock said, okay, once the teams have found each other, and once it's fixed that team A, D, or E wants to use the RENKU, please provide us the team member list, and then actually they will be accessed to the RENKU, and then they will also transform, but guided to your project, which is set up as well on RENKU. So this time it requires 2 more or less accessing stages, and for the next event in 26 we are planning it to have a permanent API to our event platform that you have only one single sign-on and can actually set up your project in RENKU with your same credentials, registration, mail addresses as you applied for the event. Just for your information, that this year requests two times access improvement or registration.
So I think if we are given the emails of all the participants for the teams, we can also create those accounts, and then the participants will get an email on how to activate the account, and then we can, once they activate it, we can add them to the groups as needed for the challenges. All right, so actually I only have one slide left. And that is just a short bullet list of how to actually get started with these hackathon challenges on RENKU. So I think the very first thing to do would be to get in touch with us to make sure that the data can be accessed. I think this is the most critical point to get out of the way, whether that's figuring out how to connect to a database, whatever it is. We can help there, and just to be sure that this works in time. We still have quite a bit of time left, so I think if we get started early, that's better. And then I would really suggest for the challenge organizers to try and think about what kind of sort of bootstrapping project package they want to put together, maybe in the form of like a template project like I showed, where all the pieces are inside, including the data, including some example code and the compute environment. And we can help, again, set this up, especially the compute environments can be tricky, so we can be involved there if needed. And then for the access control, we've already talked a lot about this, but yeah, if the data and or code are confidential, you can use private projects and private groups. If not, I think we can discuss there what exactly it means to keep things visible or not, and we can help you make the right choice for those. And please let us know long enough in advance so that we can make sure that everybody has access that needs to have access. And finally, before the event begins, for those who will be using proprietary data, having data connectors will not be enough. They will also need credentials. So we need to make sure that those credentials are distributed to give access to both the data, and in some cases, for example, there might be a private GitHub repository with the code, they will also need to be added to that GitHub repository. We have some other information. Here I added a link to our community portal where there's a bunch of other information on how to set up for events. And yeah, this is the end. So you can everybody can go to RENKU Lab and make an account. We have a community portal with a lot of documentation and other bits of information there. And if anything isn't clear, or if you need anything clarified or explained, give us a shout at our email, and you can subscribe to our newsletter. We also have a forum which is linked from our that was the wrong one, from our community portal, and a blog that you can check out. So with that, I'll stop there and see if there's any more questions. Otherwise, I think we can wrap up.